We're the sort of secret sauce behind a lot of viral tracks to essentially connect those clients to creators. We incentivize creators to use said songs or films in their content and make it essentially go viral.
British entrepreneur Josh Deal founded ZEBR, a music platform that pairs more than 5,000 influencers with music to create trending sounds on TikTok. The platform amplifies trending songs that lead to sales and streaming spikes. The company has landed 20+ top 10 trending sounds on the platform by artists including Madonna, Elton John, and Billie Eilish.
This is dynamite. This is a really great idea. He said, but be prepared to be the most hated guy in the music industry. What we're actually doing is replacing traditional marketing, which is billboards and TV ads, and actually going, you're gonna pay a creator to have your music. At the time, it wasn't. It was sort of unheard of. Now it's obvious, and it's
in the same way in which a restaurant would pay perhaps an influencer to come and dine at the restaurant. You're paying the influencer to use your music.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And everyone's kind of tried to do it. We've noticed that labels have tried to do it, and I wish them well. And I think
I'm sure you wish them well.
Yeah.
Is there a proven recipe to go viral?
The algorithm is changing all the time, so subjective to sometimes what can work, because really the algorithm is humans. If you closed it all down tomorrow, you would go back to a very disconnected world.
Would you say you're successful? Josh, you're the founder of ZEBR. In the simplest of terms, what is ZEBR?
So it's an influencer marketing platform. We look at it as a paid organic approach of how we run campaigns. So we've essentially scaled the sort of unscalable space and gamified influencer marketing and really became an agency by accident. So the concept of how we do it is we have a mobile app and we work with film companies, we work with record labels to work on new releases, catalog, soundtrack, and then sort of film, movies to essentially connect those clients to creators. And we look for the sort of micro to macro creators at scale. So we'll run competitions and gamify it. So we incentivize creators to use said songs or films in their content and make it essentially go viral. So we're the sort of secret sauce behind a lot of viral tracks. We're very lucky to work on. We're always doing about 7 out of the top 10 tracks at any time, primarily across the US and UK and globally now. So it's a connection point of that to make sort of viral moments and create new exciting things on social.
I want to go back to your late teens because I want to understand what kind of life, what type of life you lived that led you to build a business of this nature. What did you study in university?
I did 1 year at university. So at the time, I think now you have to do 2 years further education in the UK. I was just before that threshold where you could leave school at 16 and go out into the world. So I went to uni, I went to BIM in Brighton for 1 year when I was 16, 17. I did a diploma in drums. So I was actually a drummer prior to this. So I used to play drums and for singer-songwriters and do session work as a musician. So I was I'd played drums since 14, 15. Went to drum lessons, studied with Bob Armstrong as a jazz instructor, and then left school and went to university for 1 year doing drums.
And then you dropped out.
And then I dropped out, yeah. So my drum teacher, I thought I was going to go on the whole way and graduate, and I went to BIM. I thought I was going to be in the next Kooks because that's the sort of bands that were coming out of there, and you've got this kind of Rockstar dream. Did it for a year, learned about session musician work, so realised you could actually play for different pop artists and you didn't have to be in a band to kind of get into the music industry. And it was kind of a revolution for me. And then went into sort of contacting art. So my drum teacher at the time said, I was commuting. So he said, you're commuting. It was Gordy Marshall, who's a great drummer. He plays for the Moody Blues. And he convinced me not to stay on, which I thank him for now because it was a really good decision. I saved 3 years of my life, really. And I think for some others it works. For me, it wouldn't have worked. Education and that system was...
He convinced you?
He convinced me to not stay, yeah.
How? Why?
He just said, you're commuting X amount of time a day. You're having like 3-hour breaks between lessons. You would use that time so much more productively by practicing at home and networking yourself. So I basically sort of agreed to do that, stayed at home, and I'd have 40% more time to actually practice, have more focused practice time, have a private instructor, which was much cheaper in the long run of what universities end up becoming. And then I could sit at lunch and network and reach out to studios and artists and sort of build my own network in the music industry. So I sort of did that for that second year instead.
That's a very practical and pragmatic approach to making a decision, in particular for an artist, for a musician. So you're basically looking at the time that you were spending in this commute and the amount of money that you were spending. Those are the two factors that determine this decision. So, sort of. I mean, it's more so the time, I think, was just like the how productive you can actually be spending that time, and it was great to social. I loved the first year that I did, and I recommend people to. I think when you're 16 and you don't know how to get into an industry, I think it's a great, especially for music. It was great to be around other musicians. The community and the culture around the university was great. It was great to be in a new city and sort of be around different people playing for different people. So I think that the mix of the socialization, so the sort of social side of it was great. But actually kind of, isolated. But if you're isolating yourself and you're practicing at home, make sure you're still going out to local nights or mixing with other people. I think that's still the social side, and playing with different musicians is still really important. So you are a musician, an artist that dropped out from university and right now is a successful entrepreneur in the tech, social media sector. Do you think for anyone that would like to get into that space and become an entrepreneur in that industry would benefit from going to university?
Personally, I don't think so. I think there's more access by going the way that everyone else. My mum always says to me, do what everyone else isn't doing. And I think there's such a conveyor belt of musicians, and
it's a very liberal education,
right?
It's
yeah
great.
Yeah, I think there's so many people coming out of the same system. You think every year every university or every sort of creative industry is producing so many graduates in those spaces. I mean, I am kind of like, I'm a dropout advocate. So I almost like everyone on my staff or everyone that I meet, I sort of,
So if your kids, they drop out, are you going to celebrate it?
I think it depends what they're doing. I think possibly. Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, I think there's industries and there's things to study, which I'm trying to be sort of a little bit balanced with it. Like I think if you want to go into if you want to be a brain surgeon or you want to be a vet, I think absolutely education is important, and certificates of doing that are really important
and required.
Exactly. But I think for a lot of creative industries, I think it's almost the opposite. I think you should be going the sort of uncharted route, which is people aren't wandering down. I think everyone wants to go the sort of the same route that everyone else is going. And it gives you the same opportunities that everyone else is getting, rather than standing out, trying to be a bit more of a black sheep amongst it.
And I get that from a creative perspective. So if you're not following the norm, it allows your brain to think in very unconventional ways. And if you're tapping into the social media space, for example, like yourself, it enables you to create things that nobody has done, to innovate. Yeah. But then that's one thing. But then a different thing is building a business. And there is a blueprint in how to build a successful business. In your journey, has there been a moment in which you thought, damn it, I think I could have learned this at university and perhaps saved time or money?
I don't think so. I think there's so much access online to almost everything that you could wish for. I mean, ChatGPT now, you could, I think you can sort of look. I spent a lot of time. So that second year that I didn't go to university, I spent reading a lot. So I think I learned a lot through networking in London. So I would reach out to studios. I tried to get as close as I could to the industry and people in the industry that were doing it every day. So producers, managers, artists that were upcoming, reading books. So I tried to read as many autobiographies of people that had been in the industry. So people like Jerry Weintraub is a great book, who's worked so many different roles in this industry. He was Elvis Presley's tour manager, Frank Sinatra's tour manager. Oh. You can learn so much from I just kind of binge read for a year, so many books and kind of the self-help section as much as I could. watched YouTube videos around people's stories, similar to this really. I think that's why I wanted to do this, to sort of speak to my younger self in some ways of going, you don't have to have parents that are in the industry. You don't have to have any connections. You don't have to go to university to unlock that audition that you think you're going to get. You can actually go your own way and figure out and learn as much as you can and be able to reference people's experiences. Because I think anything you're looking to do, someone's done already.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it.
I think it is. Yeah, it's true.
And you're mentioning industry. What about industry experience? So do you think anyone would benefit from getting corporate experience prior to becoming an entrepreneur? In your particular field?
Yeah, I think I think there is value to it. I think if you go and try and jump to be an entrepreneur, I think if you look at the concept of an entrepreneur, it's a lot of networking. It's a lot of who you know and what you know in some aspects, and you can learn that stuff. I think number one, being just a social person. I think being, a lot of things I've been looking at. There's this great guy. I think his name's like Scott Galloway, I think his name is. I've been listening to him a lot, and he says whenever he sort of educates or coaches entrepreneurs in the space, one of the first things he says is go and speak to strangers. And I think there's such a value in that. If I look back at
to do what with strangers?
So just to be social and to be put on the spot and be able to have conversations in a spontaneous way. Okay. So put yourself in social environments where you can speak. And I think university, that first year, did that for me, where you're in a completely foreign situation with people you haven't grown up with, and you're around different people. You're sort of forced to make conversation. When you walk in, you can tell the people that are going somewhere. The ones that walk in with the hood up, keep their headphones in, don't converse, don't make eye contact, aren't going to be the ones in 6 years' time, because life is long, that person you're sitting next to is going to be the drummer for Beyonce, and you should have spoken to them and actually, so make friends with everyone, all the different years, speak to so many people. So I think being in social environments, whether it's university or going out and doing stuff or working in a corporate job, I think if you jump to be an entrepreneur too early and you're a 17-year-old entrepreneur, I think, well, what's your entrepreneurship based on? If you might have an idea and you might have some funds, but if you've not got a contact at, do you know anyone at CAA? Do you know anyone that's at Sony Music? Do you know anyone that works in film? Do you know anyone that can do photography? And so I think that your early 20s should be collecting and networking with as many variety of people. And I think that's what I did for so long. I didn't jump to try and become an entrepreneur too early. I sort of worked as a drummer for different artists. I tried to intern at Sony and didn't get in, but I tried to get around and work with as many different people. I worked in the film space as I was doing like background acting for roles. I got to meet directors, and so it allowed me to, I got to meet a director called Michael Gracie, who I auditioned for in commercial films, so like commercials. And years later, he became the director for The Greatest Showman, and we've kept in contact, and I've been able to message him and meet with his assistant, and that's allowed me to learn more about film now. So all of these different experiences build your network to then later on in life, because life is so long that 7 years later you can connect and ring that person up. So I think being a social and going and working in different spaces is important.
I 100% can correlate with that, because prior to starting my company, my business, I was in strategy consulting, and what that unlocked were a few things. The first one, tap into potential investors. And my very first investor was someone that was working within the consulting firm that I was working for. Another thing fundamentally important for us was to be able to identify a gap in the market, and I identified it while I was in consulting, because I was working cross-sector and I saw a clear gap in a particular sector.
Yeah, 100%.
And then the third thing, were applying some principles that perhaps were not applicable in a copy-paste approach, but I could mold them to what it was needed, and at least I had a baseline on how to go from A to B. And that was very beneficial. So, going back to you. So you drop out from university, you get all these different experiences in the music sector, in the filming industry. How and when did you come up with the idea for ZEBR?
So I think the journey through music, I love what you just said actually, and it's very similar to my experience, where I was around in music for 7-8 years touring as a musician, sort of got to work in lots of studios with great producers, toured, similar to finding a market like you did, where I noticed a sort of, I guess, an attention sort of bridge where I was recognizing artists were breaking out through sync. So I worked with an artist, Gabrielle Aplin, who broke through on a John Lewis ad in 2012. She had the sort of Power Love cover. It went onto the John Lewis ad. It was on TV everywhere for that year. The track went to #1 2 weeks before Christmas. So sync was becoming, and I was around a lot of artists like Sophie Tucker and Icona Pop, and these guys were breaking out through Apple ads. And so TV adverts were an amazing opportunity. Love Island, we see it now. And so there's sort of a great...
When was this?
So this was 2012.
2012, okay.
Yeah, 2012 when, so she had her first sort of, her big sync there. And there was a real pattern that was happening where artists were breaking out through that. So the year after it was Lily Allen or Tom Odell, lots of artists were breaking out through these moments, which gave huge discovery. I wanted to essentially create the contemporary version of that. So I was really excited by that discovery portal and saw the equivalent of that being as like social media. So at the time, TikTok wasn't really around with the licensing agreements it has, where you can just choose a song from a library. So I saw it as having, if you had your song featured on a Casey Neistat vlog, that would be the equivalent discovery. And I was discovering a lot of songs from YouTube videos that I was watching that had sort of clearance of these songs. So I wanted to create a portal that would connect independent artists to that. So that's where the concept came from. And essentially it was going, okay, how do we connect these two? We had to build out licenses agreements. Eventually TikTok's wave of social media culture evolutionized everything. It had a library now. So the game that we were coming into became much easier for us because suddenly we could just give creators the opportunity to pick this artist's song, and then we would essentially incentivize them to use it. So that was where the concept came from.
So you had this revelation in 2012 in which you realized that an amazing channel for artists to go viral are ads, marketing ads, right?
Yeah.
And then you had this revelation in which you want to take it a step further, and instead of utilizing traditional advertisement, you want to use social media platforms. So that was in 2012. Fast forward to when did you take this into a reality? So how did you build up this company?
So the idea was always there, and I was around those spaces in 2012. 2018, I sort of came up with ZEBR's
6 years later.
V1. Yeah, so 6 years later.
Interesting. How can you hold on to one idea for so long? Because
I don't think I had it though. I think so I think it wasn't really an idea I had. It was just an observation I had. Okay. And then I started to recognize, well, what would the contemporary version now in today's world be? And I started to recognize we were discovering songs through sort of social channels, but it wasn't yet TikTok. It was kind of a vlog or a sort of YouTube video or a Twitch stream, and your favorite Twitch stream was listening to a song, and so it was discovering it through that. So it took me probably 8 years for it to actually sort of.
And then when you deploy your platform in 2018, was there anyone else doing something similar?
So it was different. The platform I launched in 2018 was a different concept. So and it started with I came up with like an idea for Tinder for music. Okay. So I was like, I just wanted to start.
Walk me through that idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to start something. So I was like, I just wanted to get into so I met with Jake Leighton Pope is I kind of look at him as an uncle of mine. He's a great friend. He used to be a booking agent for Gabrielle and a lot of artists I worked with. He used to be at CAA. He now does his own independent stuff. And I used to play in the house band at the X Factor for a few years, and he used to book a lot of the acts there. And we were sort of post show. I think we're at like the after party somewhere, and he was like, "You don't want to be, sort of pretending to play trumpet on the X Factor when you're 30." He said, "Go and start something, and get yourself." And he gave me really great advice, which was basically get on the pitch. I love this concept that he has, and he says, it doesn't matter what position you're in, just get on the pitch, because if you're on the pitch, you can get past the ball, and if you can get past the ball, you can score a goal.
Interesting. You've had two mentors in two critical moments in your life that defined your path. Your teacher telling you to quit university, and this person telling you to quit your job.
Essentially, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Please go on.
Yeah, well, you're right. Yeah, it's a good observation. And to then essentially go and, you know, kickstart something yourself and whatever it ends up being. So he sort of didn't come up with an idea, just said, you know, maybe do like an Airbnb songwriting sessions or whatever it ends up, could be a good one for someone to do, whatever it ends up being, just start somewhere and then build from there. So I went and I sort of spent the next 6 months
I love that advice, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's really, really helpful. It shaped everything I did as an entrepreneur and went and came up with something. I was like, I'll just start I wanted to do something in tech. I've always been interested in tech. So I went, try and come up with an app idea. So I went, okay, a Tinder for music. You upload your music, you discover it, like, dislike, and then independent artists can upload. So we launched that. It was rubbish.
That's very brave because you didn't have a computer science background, and a lot of people would be refrained from venturing in such an industry when they're not a technical expert.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was really daunting. It was like I spoke to everyone that I could. No one had built an app before. Everyone sort of didn't really give any solid advice of like, where do you start? So I just went around, spoke to loads of agencies, found an agency in Brighton. I won't mention their name because it wasn't a great experience. And eventually just sort of went and self-funded an app project initially. So I went, okay, I'm going to build a V1 of this idea. So it gave me a load of experience. Wasn't a great idea. Don't go to an agency when you're launching a company. That'd be my first bit of advice. Find a freelancer that has the same passion, that really wants to come involved, and try and make them your co-founder if you can. So I sort of went to an agency, built
I very much correlate and support that advice 100%, but go on.
Exactly. And so that experience wasn't great, but I learned a lot. I learned what not to do and how not to build things. And eventually we kind of deconstructed everything and rebuilt again. So we went to that and launched it as a V1. It was a different concept, but it put us on the map and it allowed us to build a community.
How did you fund this?
So I had savings from my music career. I had a house at the time, which I sold. I moved back to my parents' house. So I sold that, moved back, and then basically put everything I had into it. I borrowed a little bit of money from my brother. I took a bounce back loan. So there was a COVID bounce back loan at the time. I think I basically just applied for it. We had no revenue.
You're very brave.
And I just went, apply £50,000 and they just gave it to us, and it was like interest free for the first year. We ended up paying it back after the first couple of years once we started turning over.
You quit your job in a stable environment, the X factor, an unknown one, probably that could have led you to land other jobs. You sell your house, you go back to your parents. So you're delaying gratification. You put that money into your business. You also take a loan from the government. It is true that the government were giving quick and cheap loans, but still, you were incredibly young and putting all in. And also you requested money from your family, which that can come with certain attachments. You are a brave person, and I really admire that.
Thank you,
The company is profitable now?
It is, Yeah, we were profitable in the first year, I think, after we had such quick escalation of revenue once we kind of found our market fit. So it sort of took us 4 years. I think it was 4 years of nothing, 3 to 4 years of nothing, and now we've had 4 incredible years of growth.
What do you mean 4 years of nothing?
So no revenue, essentially.
No revenue.
Yeah, so from 2018 when we launched, we didn't start turning over revenue till 2020, 2021.
Is it because you didn't have traction, or what is it that you changed in order to unlock this revenue?
I think market fit. I think the V1, as I said, wasn't a I actually launched with an intention not to have a revenue model just yet. So I made sure I kind of followed the Facebook philosophy where make it cool. And
gain traction, and then we'll see how to monetize it.
Don't try and think about how you're going to make money yet. Just build a community, build something that's interesting, that's cool and sexy, and then people will... it's that build it and they will come, and then you'll go, okay, now where can we, what's the interest
Would you do that again in that way?
It would be hard to. I think it'd be hard to.
I personally don't believe in that anymore. I think it worked when Facebook had their idea, and in particular, at that point in time, VCs were throwing a lot of money to tech startups that didn't have a revenue model. But I think in this day and age, there are so many different tech companies that are trying to raise funds that if you go to a VC, a potential VC, or even if you want to bootstrap it, it's going to cost you a lot of money if you don't have a monetization model more or less defined. But please, okay, go on.
I think it depends on what you do. I personally wouldn't advise raising money too early. I think that can end up actually tripping yourself over because you're having to hit expectations where you don't realize what it is yet. And I think I think if you can keep it bubbling, there's so many things you can do for free There's no reason. I think, so, I mean, we're looking at, 99% of companies fail, right?
Yeah.
In the startup space that raise money. There's very few that you can kind of name that are actually doing anything and actually generating profit.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of spaces that kind of trip over because they raised money too early. And I think if you get to a stage where you know where the market is going and you're building something at critical mass, I think there are certain industries and businesses that do need that and that are encouraged to raise money because they can't do it. I find so many people I speak to, it's the first thing on their mind is we're going to go raise money to do X and do this, rather than what have you got now? What can you actually self-fund? How can you put yourself against the wall where you can actually go and build something yourself and figure it out? I don't think you need to raise money to actually make something out of the gate or need to actually have everything in order to know what you're going to do. I think there's so many things you can do for free. Like we spent the first 2 years just building an Instagram page where we knew what our market was. It was independent artists and it was creators. So we started to build a community for them, and we built up to, I think we had like 10,000 followers at the time, where we were just posting. At the time we were doing like 6 posts a day, loads of stories. We were, doing all sorts of content to build a community. And it was completely free. It was just my time, which instead of, binge watching Netflix and whatever else you're doing, drinking out with your friends, do that for 3 hours a day and 15 minutes a day. And so there was so much we could do for free, where actually the Instagram page was the main benefit for us of building a network of creators and communities around that then we could leverage later to go, now we're going to offer you something of value. And we can understand this community that we've got and we've become so close to know what would benefit them and where we could add value to them. And I think that's before we had any money of input to it, because I was kind of building the app on the side. So when I came to launch the product and the kind of concept of ZEBR, I had a community to launch it with.
So you built a community, you analyze your data, and then you value engineer your value proposition to your community after 3 to 4 years of doing this, and then is when you unlock your revenue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it took us a few models first.
And how does the existing model look like?
So the existing model, so it evolved to then, I kind of just came up with a new concept of going, I'm going to allow creators to connect with influencers. And the idea was, I remember going to Tom Fredericks, who's my lawyer at Clinton's. He does Spotify's law. Really brilliant guy, and I came to him with the concept. So I've got this. I actually came to him with I had the V1, which was Tinder for music. I was going to then monetize that. So I said, well, we'll start allowing maybe artists, to distribute their music through us. And he was kind of like, well, it's not that big of an idea, but yeah, it could work. And then towards the end of the meeting, I said, well, I've actually got this other idea that I've been sitting on for a while. It's basically for artists to connect with creators and pay them to use their music. And he sort of sat there bemused for a sec and went, this is really wild idea. He said, this is dynamite. This is a really great idea. He said, but be prepared to be the most hated guy in the music industry, because traditionally everyone receives money for having their music featured in sync. Whereas you're now flipping it and saying you should pay for your music to be featured. And I said, it doesn't sound great, but
what you're tapping to
what we're actually doing. Exactly.
Right?
What we're actually doing is replacing traditional marketing, which is billboards and TV ads, and actually going, you're gonna pay a creator to have your music. At the time it was sort of unheard of. Now it's obvious, and it's
in the same way in which a restaurant would pay perhaps an influencer to come and dine at the restaurant, you're paying the influencer to use your music.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And making sure. Yeah, and that was the concept.
Were you one of the first ones, or the first ones to come up with this?
I think we were definitely the first. The only others that were doing it were sort of agencies at a smaller scale. We were the first to kind of gamify it and scale it into such a market. I
love it, and I think only someone with your experience can come up with such an unconventional thing, because, for example, I personally believe that if perhaps you went to university and stayed there longer or had a long corporate job, you would have started seeing problems that would have prevented you to deep dive into this idea, because the recommendation that your lawyer was telling you is that everyone's going to hate you because you're reversing the equation. I think you would have agreed with that and perhaps not continue if you would have had a long previous career or long previous job or went to university.
Yeah.
So I think everything happens for a reason. I don't think everyone's foot fits in the same shoe.
Yeah.
And I find your particular journey very, very interesting. So you're matching the influencer with the artists, and the artist is paying the influencer to use their music. Now, walk me through the details of that. So how much are they paying? How do you filter how good that influencer is?
So we have a community on our app. So we have an app for influencers to sign up to, where we vet them on there. We have around 15,000+ creators globally, from sort of ranging from 1,000 followers to tens of millions of followers. So it ranges from like micro to macro creator levels. We then have 2 approaches for every campaign we run. So a label or a film company will come to us, and we do, as I mentioned, new music catalog. They'll say, we've got this budget to work with. We want to get exposure and generate lots of content for it. So then we have the 2 approaches we have are challenges, which are the gamified way we run things. So we set incentivizations for creators. So it would come up on the app and it would say, Ed Sheeran unlocks tomorrow at 4 p.m. Here's the brief we want you to follow. So we either come up with a bit of an idea for the brief, or we sort of hijack a moment that's working well, or essentially fan the flames of a trend that's working. If there's nothing yet, then we'll just start from zero. The creators do it all day long. So we'll say to them, here's the song, you interpret it how you want to, and we see what we generate. We then have checkpoints of views. Influencers, based on engagements, will hit checkpoints and earn money for that. So if they get 500 views, they get X amount, 1,000 views, 10,000, 100,000. So it allows us...
And who pays that?
That's what they earn
artist.
for the... Yeah, so the influencer will earn... So we'll have a budget that gets set into that challenge, and then influencers will earn prizes based on what the content
And your typical client on the artist side, is it usually a record label or an individual
Mostly
artist?
record label. Yeah,
Okay,
we
so they have
started
big budgets
independent.
to enter
Exactly.
those type of agreements.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and we always want to make sure there's
Yeah.
a tangible budget that you can achieve certain results. I think if you're a more independent artist, I'd recommend doing as much as you can for free. Get as many of your friends before you start spending on stuff.
So basically what you're doing is tapping into the marketing budget of big record labels.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and the space has adopted a lot more to this way now.
And then to run a company like yours, you've been doing it for many years now. What kind of organizational structure do you require? So is it a very lean organization in which you have almost everything outsourced and it's a 2 or 3 man show, or women? Or do you actually need business units for marketing, operations, finance?
It's something I've kind of been learning on the fly. You sort of figure it out. So Kenny is my CTO. So he was the first. So as I mentioned, I went to an agency first, which is a horrible experience. Kenny was my saving grace. So I rang up loads of co-working spaces, and that would be my main advice. Like, find your tech guy.
So he developed the platform. You gave him free equity, I would imagine.
Yes.
Right? Well, not free equity. You gave him equity for
That's right. So
delivering
Kenny's
the
the only
service for free,
person.
so you saved the money like that.
That's it, yeah.
Did you know him? Did you have a personal
I
relationship with him?
didn't. No. So I hired him first as a freelancer.
Okay.
So I contacted loads of co-working spaces and reached out. Find someone who's got the same passion for what you're doing and loves the space. Kenny answered the phone, and it was love at first business. He was like, "Yeah, this sounds amazing. Let's meet."
Love at first business.
It was, yeah. So it was basically, and Kenny changed my life. I think without me, we were the sort of yin and yang for.
Yes.
I don't know anything about code.
Is he your co-founder? Then
He's the
just a
closest
partner?
thing to my co-founder.
Closest thing to a co-founder.
So he's the only other person in the company with shares.
And his technical expertise were enough for him to develop the first MVP. He didn't need anyone else. So he was a front-end developer,
he was
back-end
a full
developer.
stack developer.
Interesting.
Yeah, so which was really important.
Do you think you were lucky in finding him?
Definitely. Yeah, Kenny's a unicorn. You need to find a unicorn in the space of being able to do that has the same passion. So I hired him as a freelancer.
How many freelancers did you interview before?
Many.
So maybe you weren't that lucky.
Yeah.
You actually looked out for someone like him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, definitely. I mean, I'd spent a good year on every day I was ringing through different spaces, contacting anyone I knew. And coders are one of the most expensive hires you can find as well. So it was trying to find him a good cost for freelance. Was
he based close to you? So
he was. Okay. Yeah, he was local.
Do you think that's important, because everyone in this day and age right now is remote working, and people that are building tech startups? For example, a good friend of mine, I was Zooming him yesterday because I'm building another conversation for another day. But I was picking his brain on a new idea that I have, and someone behind him was in his house, and I said, "Who the hell is that guy?" And he's like, "Well, he's my developer. He lives in Portugal, but I just flew him over."
Really? Yeah.
Do you think that works?
So Kenny's in Bali now. So yes and no.
But to start
I think to
with-
start, it was really important that he was here. I think
Yes.
if I don't think we could launch the company with him in the setup.
Kenny
now.
lives in Bali.
Now he lives in Bali. Yeah, so he was in Brighton, and I was local to him. So he has so his partner
And that
his
works
kids.
perfectly fine for
Now
the company.
it works. I mean, it's amazing because
Yes.
there's almost 15 of us in the company now. So
Yes.
we've to kind of go back to how we've kept it lean. I think
15.
our culture of it, like our team is incredible. Everyone in our team has been there almost 3 years. I've just kind of hired friends and people that were close to me. And we've gone through people that haven't been great for the company, and I think probably the biggest hurdle and the biggest struggle of running a company is staff, and actually building a great culture and building great people that
At the end of this year, I'm going to have 400 of them. On one hand, I'm incredibly excited and happy. On the other hand, I think
it's
I need to start
400
going to therapy
headaches.
soon.
Yeah, it's like having 400 kids.
100%.
It's a lot, and
100%.
and you work for them. I think Gary Vee is someone I listen to a lot, and he says you work for your staff.
I completely
and
agree
I agree
with you.
with that now. Once
Yes.
you've actually hired people, you're like, yeah, my job is to make them happy and make sure they've got the great environment to work in.
Especially if one of the missions or one of the fundamental values of your work culture is staff retention, which at least for
Definitely.
us is
Yeah,
you
yeah.
definitely in a way end up working for them because you
Yeah.
want to keep them happy, incentivized, motivated.
All of that stuff, yeah,
Yes.
all of that. So I think that move for Kenny was one of those reasons. The first 2 years he was, in the country, and we spent a lot of
Yes.
time together, and we got it out of the ground, and it was just us two. And I think that was really crucial.
Yes.
And then we got to a level where, now we're 24 hours. Well, a lot of our work is in the US. We do more of our work is in the US than it is UK. We're very global as a company. So Kenny being over in Bali means that we never sleep now, which is actually a benefit. We have a few coders underneath him as well that he manages, and then I have the team in the UK.
Yeah.
So we're able to have a really good structural dynamic now.
You're saying most of your work right now is in the US. A lot of companies, when they start growing, they make conscious decisions or direct decisions on where to expand, market A or market B. And that's sometimes a proactive decision rather than reactive. Reactive is that perhaps a great opportunity lands on your table and you just grab it.
Yeah.
Was this move proactive or reactive in your case? So did you always want to go to the US because you know that your industry could thrive there, your company?
Yeah, it was more reactive. I mean, the US came to us, luckily. So I think the expansion of the industry sort of allowed us to... So we launched through Canada Universal, weirdly enough, just thinking about it now. And then we started to work with a lot of UK labels, naturally with us being based here. I would sort of network through a lot of labels. I had a few label connections from my previous sort of career in music. And then I think it just kind of snowballed and naturally moved through market. So once you get in, great contact at the London office, and I think having been in the space for sort of 6 years now, you see that there's a lot of cross-pollination with staff and companies and sort of team members moving across the different offices. So you'll get an intro saying, hey, Josh, I don't know if you remember, but I used to work at this label. I'm now at this label. Or I'd love to intro you to my friend here. So I think your reputation kind of precedes that. And it's really...
And you get that snowball effect.
It just kind of builds out into different markets. If you do a great job and you focus and you care the most and you have a great team, and our staff are just amazing and they care the most and they're on it all the time and it's a lifestyle for them and they've been able to be the best extension of myself and they've built their own rapport with clients, and that's allowed us to naturally move through. And I think you sort of start moving towards the highest points of the market. So it's going who are spending the most, where are the most important campaigns coming from, and a lot of it being, the US are the kind of biggest in the space.
What's the end goal for you? Do you want to sell this company at some point?
We've had those conversations. In confidentially, we've had kind of acquisition offers from some of the major labels, and we've had sort of acqui-hire type situations. I think it's something I've personally learned going through this experience was even social platforms we've had kind of opportunities from as well.
Yeah.
I personally learned that when you launch a company, there's always that sort of idea and that fantasy that you're going to either, get loads of investment or you're going to sell and you're going to sail off on your yacht. And
definitely that's what social media is telling us.
It is, isn't it? And I think there's a misconception to that where if you set that as your goal, you're going to spend so much time distracted on building decks every month. You're going to be trying to do meetings. You're going to be trying to flirt with all of these different companies. And rather than actually trying to build a company, you're going to be trying to sell a company. And it's a very different thing. And I think it's building a company that has great value.
Yeah.
Naturally, I heard a quote that was like, you don't sell your company, you get bought. And I think so much of us focus on selling rather than getting bought.
Yeah.
And getting bought is making a great company and
someone
you'll
will knock
attract
on your
it
door,
rather than trying to just, raise money every time.
Yes.
And I think that, my parents, for example, were, my dad is a carpenter, he's retired now.
Yeah.
He built my parents were sort of entrepreneurs in their own way. They did construction and building, so a very different game. But they built a company in a very traditional way. And I think they encouraged me to build it in the same way. Why are you raising, even my lawyer, Tom, said, what are you raising the money for? Do you need, what are you going to spend that money on? I said, well, we don't. We have them, we've built into a great position where we have great cash now in the company. It wouldn't make any difference to us raising the money because it's like, what are you going to spend it on? So you're kind of doing it just to have it as almost an ego boost to say you've raised money.
The company right now is only owned by yourself and your CTO.
It is, yeah. So we've been able to kind of self-finance and that first year of running the company, you go through the woods of, hold your breath as long as possible. We had so many opportunities.
And that was for 4 years.
We had so many investment. People were throwing money at us in an honest way. We just and great people, and it was hard to turn. And we sort of got to a stage of going, well, what are we going to do with the money that we can't do now anyway? And I think that's where it goes back to making sure you're giving equity and hiring key people. My lawyer said. And I say lawyer, I think it's a throwaway term because it sounds like it's a real expense, which it can be. But I think find a lawyer. I think it's one of the key things I would start with. Find a lawyer that has a passion for your industry. Because I didn't spend anything at the initial stages. It was only when we started to make money. And if you can have someone that's almost going to invest in you as a person.
Why a lawyer?
Because they've got so much foresight on, obviously, the legal stuff of what you're trying to do. You're not going to misstep a lot of the time. And
I think in your particular use case, there were a lot of tedious legal barriers that didn't need it to. But perhaps in other industries, I wouldn't say that that's replicable. For example, in my case, we do have, depending on the different deal that we are approaching, 3 different lawyers.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't say any of them are my friends, to be honest.
Really, yeah.
No? And I think that they're brilliant when it comes to giving you legal advice, but at least in my experience, they're terrible at giving you business advice because I think most lawyers, they are very risk adverse and they just want to protect you as much as possible, even if you don't get the business done, right?
Yeah. But that's great to have a devil's advocate. So I'll go meet Tom and because he's got such an industry sort of experience across so many different sectors and he's seen, he sat with Daniel Ek having his first investment. So I think having someone like that around me.
Did you have a personal relationship with him prior to him becoming your lawyer?
Me? No. Okay. Met with him in a serendipitous way, went to an art gallery. Someone was
You just become good friends with everyone you work with.
Try to, yeah.
We should work together.
Right, yeah. It's just, I think just being social and being networking and speaking, it comes from, if I look back, there's a the breadcrumbs of everyone that I've met somewhere along the line has helped me out because of something. And it's going to an event, or I went to an art gallery exhibition, met someone who was interning at the law firm, and she was like, oh, you should come meet Tom. He's the best. Got a meeting with him. He loved the concept, loved what I was trying to do, and just gave me lots of advice to begin with. So I think anyone you can get advice from that is close to the sun as possible and has done so many different projects is great for that. And I think if you can get a creative lawyer that is sort of in that space, then it's brilliant. That's in your sector rather than just trying to find.
I'm going to stress test you. So you have built a marketplace. How would you pivot, or what would you do if the social media platforms would tap into this and they would enable artists to be connected with influencers?
It's happened. We have gone through the multiple sort of journeys, going really similar to what I've just been mentioning about, acquisitions or selling or whatever that would look like. We've realized we got to a stage where we're just very content in what we're doing and happy to be centralized across the space. So we actually work a lot for social platforms. So we did a lot of work for TikTok at Sound On. We were the kind of secret source for a lot of their projects behind the scenes. They kind of of drew us in, almost like Bruce from Nemo, where they sort of drew us into the company and then tried to extract everything we were doing and built their own thing, which actually failed and hasn't worked. And it's actually only benefited us because a lot of labels realized that we were the company behind those projects, and now they've started to come to us. So we still have a great relationship with them, and I think what they're doing is great and the team are great. But as a company overall, that's kind of what they've done. So there's been a sort of, we've kind of almost gone in competition with our clients in that way, where TikTok have kind of built out their own system to do it. And, you know, in the immediate launch of it, you sort of think, well, you know, and everyone's kind of tried to do it. We've noticed that labels have tried to do it. And I wish them well, and I kind of go, well, good luck, because what we went through, I think
I'm sure you wish them well.
Yeah, but I look and think, good luck, because you're probably going to die trying to do it.
But I wish you well.
But I wish you well. Yeah, I wish you well.
You'll die peacefully.
Exactly. You can die peacefully, and we'll sit on the sidelines knowing that the sleepless nights and the everything we went through, it's like we're 3 years ahead of everyone. Yes. And I think I sleep very peacefully at night knowing that. And I think, well, you know, I've got my popcorn and I'm watching and I'm interested to see how you do it. And we've kind of,
I respect that, because you're basically saying that hard work is always going to beat even deep pockets. Because
it is.
These companies, they are bigger than yours.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And they could implement something very quickly, very robust.
Yeah, overnight. Yeah.
But you just believe that grit basically is going to...
Yeah, I know they haven't got the team that we've got.
Yep.
I know they haven't got the culture of what we've got and the work ethic, and you know that. And I think respectfully, when you look at the staff at these types of companies, they are 9 to 5, and I think, you know,
and you aren't,
and we aren't. So
exactly.
I think, you know, Dave finishes at 5, yes. Who works on that team, and Karen, and they're not going to be, you know, up at night and trying to work out why that's not done well, or pivot that idea, or innovate here. And we are, and that's why I know we'll win.
How do you get your team to do that? Because I run various teams, even the team here in the podcast. So everyone listening, guys, maybe we'll start working on weekends.
Yeah.
How do you get
post 5 o'clock?
How do you get for them to actually? I don't like to force things ever, but how do you get employees to buy into that idea? Do you give them any incentives?
I think I heard something great from, I can't remember his name, but he's one of the co-founders of Netflix. And I just watched the podcast and I loved what he said. And he basically said when he was running Netflix at the early stages, they had all these facilities at the company, and they had hot tubs and everything you can ever imagine. Yeah. And he was walking past some of the engineers sitting in the hot tub, and they were in, you know, outside in the sun on their break in a hot tub. And he said, when I walked past them, they didn't see me, and I could overhear them complaining about the company. And he said, well, they're sitting in a hot tub complaining about the company. And he said, I realized in that singular moment that it's not actually about the facilities or the environment that you create. It's actually about the flexibility and what you're giving them as a culture, and actually allowing them to live in the way they want to.
Remote working in your case?
It could be, I think so, yeah. I mean, for us, we do, you know, 3-4 days in the office. We give the team, you know, 2-3 days from home some weeks. We allow them, our team are sort of all over. So we have some in London, some in Brighton. I've allowed them, you know, for Kenny, for example, him being in Bali, I'm getting, you know, more productive work out of him. He's happier with his life. We still make sure we've got that. I still think it's important to have that collective culture.
So
and
flexibility
be around each other.
Is the key factor for employees to work after hours?
I think everyone has, I mean, I definitely don't force anyone to work out of hours in that way. I think I kind of give them, I look at us as like a sports team, and I say we're a sports team. Everyone in the team is putting points on the board, and the more points we put on the board, that we win the championship. And we won the championship for the last 3 years with a leading team.
And if you win the championship, what does that mean for them? Because for a lot of my employees, they would think, well, if we win the championship, you are winning.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do you share that success with them?
I think incentivizing with, I think you can do obviously salary increases as and when it sort of makes sense.
And is this something that you give them visibility to? Meaning, if we achieve this target, this is what you're going to be getting.
Not so much. So we don't really go transparently on like targets or aspects. I think we're lucky that we have a factor of, you know, the campaigns and the projects we do are with Lady Gaga and they're with Ed Sheeran, and so they're always like...
It's more of an intrinsic motivation.
You wake up in the morning and you get a Barbie campaign in. Or last Christmas we were working on Home Alone. So there's always
It's more purpose-driven.
It's a purpose-driven thing where it's a very exciting, dynamic, creative industry. And I think we've been able to There's a bit of a culture hack where we've hired everyone that's almost been in music or has a musical interest, plays an instrument, has been in some aspect of what we do, where we're not hiring sort of corporate ladder. I personally like to hire from, and obviously we're quite a lean team. We're not at the 400 level, but I think everyone, and that's why it's so critical with who you have on board. And I personally like to find talent in unexpected places rather than hiring someone from a corporate ladder that's worked at a label for many years and is now going to bring all this aspect in. You can train skills. I think you can't train someone to not be an idiot or not, and to be a nice person.
1,000%.
Yeah. So we just want really lovely people that bring a great energy to the team. And then we can build off of that and we can train them. And I think that's the main thing, is people that actually want to be part of it and want to be part of something that they can look back on and go, you know, look what we did. And when I was growing up, I used to work on this project and that project, and it feels like a great time in your life. And I think your 20s should be doing that. I don't think you should go for a corporate job as such. I think you should be working in the riskier aspect, because you get to learn closer to success and failure.
Also because I personally believe that failure is just part of succeeding at some point. So they go hand in hand. But also, if failure, we all start from the point in which accept that failure is an option, you might as well want to fail early, because your opportunity cost is very small. So your career in your 20s, you're not leaving behind a huge salary, but also the cost of failing is very cheap. If you're failing at the age of 40, you perhaps might have some kids and a wife and a lifestyle that you need to maintain. But if you're in your 20s, you're not very much sacrificing anything. And your risk appetite, it is by nature different. So I fundamentally agree with you that the best time for anyone to start playing with the idea of becoming an entrepreneur and testing things is in their 20s, because ultimately what you want is not to build up a great company immediately, but to learn how to become a great entrepreneur so you can build one company or 3 companies down the line that become successful. So if you build a very successful company in the very beginning, it might be very much related to luck. But for example, in your case, you had to pivot, to adapt, to shape, to understand. And then I know how to turn up the volume because I stayed small too long to understand what works, so then I can go big and put all the gas in the tank. You're obviously a social media expert. So I think one important thing that everyone is trying to reach these days is understanding what it takes to go viral on social media. Is there a proven recipe to go viral?
I think viral is termed in different ways, where you're looking at a singular video that might go viral because of something creative you've done. Also, just having your song go viral is also another aspect, where you're getting thousands of people using your music, which can be stemmed from one idea. I think the recipe and the algorithm is changing all the time. I don't think anyone knows, even the people that work at these companies, I don't think they sometimes even know. There's probably a few people that are locked away that have an idea, but creatively it's so subjective to sometimes what can work, because really the algorithm is humans. You know, it doesn't matter. Algorithms always change, but human perception of a piece of content, topical things. So I think if you can hijack moments that are topical, relevant in social other landscapes, so maybe something that's on Netflix or a certain film, we'll see correlations to that. In the world that we work in, which is more so activating kind of film sort of access and song access to creators, it's making those sort of relevant connections to lyrics and narrative driven things. So if you can create something that is relatable, where it can allow people to interpret it in their own way, and you're building, and you can find that piece of your song that is relatable. I think Phineas actually mentioned something, Billie Eilish's brother, who they'd written everything together. He came out with something that was on music, where when people sort of create lyrics that aren't too storytelling or too specific, it makes it more relatable to everyone. So if you're not saying actual exact details of a name and a place and a location, if you do that, it makes it harder for you to relate and sort of imagine yourself in that position. I think that's what's the beauty of music and film, is we always kind of interpret ourselves in that position. We project ourselves into that that position. So with music itself, when you sort of have a song that can be interpreted in lots of different ways, especially with POV content, I think that's a recipe for something great. So it can be more narrative driven. So finding the section of your song to be able to go viral is really important. Experimenting with timestamps, experimenting with many ideas, because often the time for us, it ends up happening organically and is almost never the thing we thought would go viral. You think it's going to be the dance, actually it ends up being, we worked on Ray Prada, and one creator from our challenge used the aged filter, and they were like, this is me as a grandma singing this song to my grandkids, and we end up having tens of thousands of people follow the same idea. And we never would have come up with that idea ourselves. It was a creator. So we like to go wider with creators and see what happens and then pick out what's working rather than trying to brainstorm an idea and crystal ball where we think this is going to go. Almost every time it never does go the way you think. So I
it's
think
not something that is predictable. You just need to put yourself out there.
Exactly.
And
try
things.
as many different ideas and go sort of, build the campaign trousers up with lots of variety of micro creators and then interpret. And you can identify what's working and go, that creator's over indexed on their average views. That's probably something that's going to work. Let's keep pushing on that idea. So I think that's always a good discovery point.
What's one truth about social media that the average person doesn't really know?
I think the cost of entry is free for anyone to do, to actually create something. I would say that anyone can be an influencer, and I think that the dilution of influencers is getting broader and broader, and it's splintering into so many niche spaces. So I think people don't realize that whatever their weird niche or passion is, they can actually build and monetize it through social as a side hustle. I think if you love Pokemon or you love collecting stamps, whatever it is, you can post something and create something and build a community around what that is and generate money. I think ZEBR has done that I think that's one of the proudest things that I find for our company and that I personally am about what we do is the variety of creators and the thousands of creators that we've had that aren't your stereotypical creator, but are more niche, that have jobs and that are mums and that actually now have an opportunity to monetize their content on the side. And I think many people don't realize they can do that. They think they have to be, a big influencer to make money.
Let's say that I'm starting from zero today and I have no money and no followers. What would you tell me to do in the first 30 days? If I want to become an influencer?
I would follow what your passions are and start creating content around them. So stick to maybe 2 or 3 types of content.
What do you mean by types? Long form, short form, video?
Yeah, so the concept of content, the style of content. So as I said, if you're into fitness or if you're into Pokemon or if you're into skateboarding, posting content around that and being on every platform that you can be, so diversifying your audience across everything.
Is frequency more important of posting than quality?
I think so, because quality is subjective.
Yeah.
And I think that's always I always look at the sort of document versus create is a concept we go for with mass scale, because quality of anything is subjective. So you've just got to put stuff out, and it goes the same for music and songs. Yeah. It's often the song that artist never thought would be cool enough to release ends up doing really well. And I think the market will always decide. So be as experimental. Don't be sort of too judgmental on your content yourself. You find a lot of people still post stuff. They delete it because it didn't do very well. Yeah. Put it out there and see what happens. Post as much as you can.
What's something you used to believe about social media success that you no longer believe?
I don't know, actually. I don't know if there is one.
Or like a myth that everyone can relate to about social media, but it's an actual myth. It doesn't work like that to become successful.
Probably that you have to have millions of followers to make money on social media.
Interesting. That's a good one. You don't.
I think you
What's
can
the
have
minimum you need to make money?
I think you can have no followers and go somewhere and say and find. You could go into a restaurant and say, hey, I love your restaurant. I've got a creative idea that I'm going to start posting about this. I've got no followers yet, but I'm going to be posting every day. Yeah. I'd love for you to sponsor me in some way. And you would go, well, yeah, great. If you're going to go off and do that work, then brilliant. And then we'll incentivize you with more as it goes along. I think there's a lot of people aren't doing anything
Yes.
because they think they have to get to a level to do it. But you've just got to start somewhere and build out. And especially with the way that TikTok is framed, personally, we don't look at followers a lot of the time. We look at engagement.
Why not followers?
Because the TikTok algorithm and concept is there's a real lottery effect. So when you first start posting, so almost everyone that first starts posting has a viral moment at some early stage if they're consistent enough and the content is good enough. Ali, for example, who works on my company, posted one of her first videos. It's got a couple million views on there because it was just sort of a video of her getting her new dog. And it's one of those ideas that you don't have to have followers to go viral. I think the structure of TikTok is very different to what we used to see on YouTube and most traditional platforms where they're encouraging creators to post. So essentially,
which one pays better, influencers?
It's less about the platform that we notice. It's more about the brands and the companies and the clients that you can work for to post on your content. So it's more about leveraging the audience that you're building and leveraging the content that you're building. So I think you can start initially by building out an audience. Anyone can go viral on TikTok in some aspect. It's more saturated than it used to be, but TikTok still has its charm where it's going, anyone can post and you can get discovered by someone. It always gives you a sort of an algorithmic kick initially, and it puts a dip test out and goes, this is performing well. If it is, we'll show it to more people.
But the two main platforms are TikTok and Instagram.
I would say so, yeah. I would say that YouTube, I think, is still an amazing place to build audiences. It's my personal favorite. It's kind of where I grew up watching stuff. I still go on there now. I built ZEBR for YouTube originally. I think YouTube Shorts is becoming really cool. Snapchat is another great one. I think you should be on everything.
And if you were to split where the marketing budgets from big brands are going to, if you can split it into all these different platforms, how would you split it? So if I am, let's say, Nike, out of my social media budget, 50% goes to Instagram and then the rest is in between TikTok, or how would you split it?
Yeah, I would say...
based on your experience.
Personally, I would be putting the majority of it onto the platform that's leveraging the most engagement and has the most community and culture on, which is TikTok right now. So there's always going to be the coolest kid in the playground at some stage, right? And I would say that's TikTok right now. I think, and that's across kind of mass content. I think YouTube is more bespoke to branded creators. So creators that kind of have more of a brand about them, have more of an audience, a kind of more of a sort of celebrity type influencer. I think that world works amazing for them. I think TikTok is kind of the mass, if you want to have sort of a paid organic user generated approach to have a sort of a conversation going on about your brand, and it looks like you got lucky overnight and you can influence those moments a little bit and encourage what you want your brand to be spoken about on those platforms. I think so many brands are scared about bad conversations happening or the wrong conversations, but they're happening anyway. So you may as well influence it a little bit to help encourage more positive conversations about your brand. So I think I would personally focus on TikTok as a primary platform. I would look at cherry picking certain creators on YouTube, but for user generated content, which is ultimately what word of mouth is in person, and is why we go do stuff, TikTok and Instagram are king for that, and TikTok firstly. So I would be doing 70-80% on TikTok and splitting the rest elsewhere.
From what you're saying, it sounds like TikTok requires for the influencer to spend less money creating quality content, and it's just quicker content, rather than, for example, YouTube, that perhaps you need to have more of a professional format, and maybe that's also related to Instagram.
I think so, yeah.
So going back to the question in which I'm starting with 0 followers, no money, within the first 30 days, what you're advising me to do is start on TikTok and start
I'd be posting 3+ videos a day on TikTok every day.
Okay. Slightly different angle to this question, but still about social media. So in 10 years from now, do you think we're going to be proud of how we've been using social media today, or we're going to be looking back with regret?
Personally, I think there's pros and cons to it in lots of ways. I think there's a lot of conversations around kids being exposed to social media too early. I think not going outside. I was lucky. I was the generation where you'd go outside and play football in the garden and build, tree houses, and not be on. I wasn't playing video games, and I wasn't, on social media as much. And Facebook and Bebo and MySpace, they started to come around. So I'd sort of dabbled in those spaces, and I had a band, so I was promoting it. So I think I use it in a very positive way. I think there's ways you can be encouraged to use social in a positive way. I think it's evolutionized creative industries so much where there's no gatekeeper. I think it's an incredible place for anyone to create what they want to do in their lives. I think if you closed it all down tomorrow, you would go back to a very disconnected world. And I think it's given so many more opportunities to people. So I think there's a massive positive that you can all look at it and use it for the right ways. I think when you go back to, I always love looking through history and going, when the internet came out, everyone thought it was going to be a fad. The internet, not Google or the actual internet itself. And I think there's always pushback on whenever anything is slightly out of our control or kind of wildly goes into a new space. We see it with AI as becoming the next thing. I think if you adopt it into a positive way and you educate your kids and you educate, the new generations on it and can steer them into the right places, I think there's so much more opportunity because of it that is giving kids and new opportunities for entrepreneurs so much more abundance because of it.
Interesting. I think education is going to be key. But yeah, as an entrepreneur, what's the greatest lesson you've learned?
I would say patience.
Patience.
Yeah, I think it's going to take longer than you think it is. And
long game.
It's a long game. I always say life is long. And, I feel like I've had like 4 lives in my 32 years of doing different careers and different experimental things in music and in, film and entrepreneurship now and tech. I think realizing that it's going to take longer than you think and sticking with it and being honest with yourself and having great people around you that have your best interest at heart to know that it's a long game and you're going to have to sacrifice a lot. You're going to have to probably break up with your partner that's not supporting you.
What did you have to sacrifice?
Probably the last 6 years, just having any serotonin in my life in a lot of ways, like not having a sort of social life. I have one friend that I've had, Charlie from school, who's my sort of friend at school, and he's the only friend I really have, apart from everyone that I work with now. So I think having a very lonely life and a very isolated life and not having, not going away and not sort of experiencing, nightlife and things that most younger people are doing, you sacrifice a lot of that. So when you in your 20s, and I think a lot of people have it the other way around, they try and live everything out in their 20s to then later I'll figure it out, I'll get a job. Whereas if you really push in your 20s, you can actually get out ahead of everyone else. And then when in your 30s, you'll be in a much more abundant place. And I think I'm starting to find more life now because of that. So I think that was a big sacrifice.
If you could start over, what would you do differently?
I'd probably do the same I've done, I think, in the sort of because I think serendipity of life is such a important factor, and you only recognize it when you look backwards and you realize, well, if I hadn't gone to that thing, I think I would have encouraged myself to go to more networking events and to more social events where you can sort of meet different aspects and different people in different industries. I think trying to build and throw yourself out in your 20s as much as you can.
Do you have any regrets? And I need you to be very honest.
Regrets? I don't think I do on anything I've built out, or I've failed a lot, and there's been a lot of things that I've wasted money on with building, but actually it all ends up being an investment.
Any personal regret that was a consequence of a professional decision?
In terms of what?
Perhaps you let go of someone because you didn't have the right time to spend with that person. Or as you were saying, you missed out on opportunities to live a different life. Do you have any regrets whatsoever now that you look backwards?
I wouldn't say so, no. I think I'm pretty happy with the decisions I sort of made. I think it's worth it. I think I got through the other side. I'm now trying to spend more present time with my family. I've got a new partner now, and I'm spending more time with her, and I'm making sure that I'm making time for that. I think that's what I'm in the key stage of now, where I've put so much work in and sacrificed so much to kind of get myself to this place in life where, you know, I'm in a very abundant position where I have more flexibility. I can sort of decide what I want to do every day. I have a great team and a great company. I'm really encouraging myself to have more life as well, and spend more downtime where I'm not just working all the time, because I think I've just spent every day, every hour just doing that. So I think I'm in the pivotal stage now where when you do start to see some success and you get into a more comfortable position in life, not to completely move away from the work ethic, but make sure you're getting a healthy balance, because I don't think I've been the healthiest in the last 6 years, mentally and physically, as I could have been. But I don't think I would have been able to do that without having the sort of work that I've put in. So now I'm in that stage where I'm consciously trying to push myself to be more present, to do more things that maybe aren't business focused, but are sort of more personal focused as well.
Thank you for the honesty. Josh, you were included in Forbes 30 under 30 list in 2022. Was this important to you?
I think it was a surprise. It was actually one of the team members mentioned it and said, "Oh, you should, look into this." And we ended up getting amazing nominations from all the companies that we were working with. So it came up as a surprise. It gets announced on the day. So you just sort of get an email and it says, "Congrats, you've got this." So I think it was a nice badge of honor to have us recognized for what we were doing and innovating in such a space. And the people that I've met through it, and it's been celebrated in the industry of what we've done. And I think it's been because of the team. It was kind of celebrated, it wasn't just myself. It felt like I was awarded it, but it was a trophy for the whole team. So I think it was nice for us all to have some recognition, because entrepreneurship feels like a sport you're playing where you don't win any trophies. And it's sometimes nice to have something, F1 drivers in most cases get a trophy every week. Or there's, and football players don't. And so it's sometimes nice to have something to recognize it for you, and to feel like it's a team accomplishment, to know that everything we've been putting in was innovative and different and against the odds of what we were trying to do. So I think it was a personal recognition for me, going from, I'm just a drummer that has now turned entrepreneur, and it sort of allowed me to
sort of validation.
I think so, yeah. I think you do have a lot of imposter syndrome when you're going into a new industry and starting in a space where everyone's been here forever, and you've come from a different style of working. So I think to go into this and be recognized as an entrepreneur, which I never really labeled myself as before, it's sort of, I think entrepreneurship kind of gets achieved. Otherwise, you're just someone that says they're doing stuff as a side hustle. And I think there's
you definitely are an entrepreneur. You have the spirit, you have the mindset, the problem-solving approach. I can definitely tell you that. And I've sat with countless entrepreneurs in this show. Did Forbes help your journey as an entrepreneur in any way? Perhaps to raise funds, or maybe to recruit? Not really. I think it was a nice discovery platform. I think being in the Forbes kind of catalogue of people was great we had a few reach outs, I think, in discovery. I use it a lot as sort of it's almost like a checker trade for your business, but in the entrepreneurial way, it's quite nice for people to have that sort of official stamp of something, but nothing directly. It's been more sort of indirect, that we've been using it as a sort of badge and a sense of approval for our company, I think, as well. How would you define success? I think being able to achieve a healthy kind of harmony of lots of things. So if you can be healthy and happy and doing something you're talented at and passionate about, then you've got the holy grail, I think, of all of those things. I think if you can make sure there's not an area of your life that's going to sacrifice too much to compensate for doing something else. I've learned that, I would stay up very late. So I think now I'm trying to get more of a healthy lifestyle balance, and, I walk around with a skip in my step, and I'm sort of, a much healthier, happier person
with the way that I live my lifestyle. So I think definitely there's a sort of flexibility and way that you can live your life that gives you what you want to do. And I think if you can find what you're talented at and find a place where you can make money from that and have a great community of people around you, then I think that's the best you can achieve.
Based on this very definition, would you say you're successful?
I would, yeah. Now I am, yeah. I think it's taken me a long time to get to it. I think it's now that you kind of work your way and you keep your head down for so long, and then you sort of pop up and appear and look around and go, wow, look how far I've come. I think there's that recognition for yourself that you need to do sometimes. I'm definitely not finished. I still feel like I'm beginning. I think once you accomplish one mountain, you look up again and you see there's another one, and you never really finish. And I think that there is a slight danger to the treadmill that you keep wanting more. So I think if you can balance your life with how much you start earning great money, and then suddenly your lifestyle gets really fancy. I think if you can live within your means and reinvest into your company and make sure you're not being silly. I've seen many people have great success, earn lots of money, and they're very quickly losing it because they're trying to match their lifestyle to what they're earning. Yeah. So I think I've tried to be quite conservative with what I'm spending. Make sure that you're spending on things that are benefiting you and people around you, and you can be giving to people and do it for your lifestyle. And I think that's where I've got to a place where I'm in a healthy, happy place now.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for coming this morning. You're a very inspiring and genuine entrepreneur, and I say this with an open heart. I've had the pleasure of chatting in this show with other great entrepreneurs in the social media space, and I still cannot find, for the love of God, a clear recipe on how to go viral, which is one thing that I think almost everyone is trying to find. But there is one common denominator that all of you have shared, which is consistency. If you post every day, at some point you're going to break through. Yeah. And for me, that's a revelation or a further stamp proof that even in the newest forms of business, the oldest saying within business still applies, which is grit, hard work will always outperform luck or talent.
Yeah.
As I said, I think your approach to entrepreneurship, in this case to social media, is very genuine, is very innovative. But the particular reason why I really like it is because most companies define success through a very purely financial KPI. So how does my bottom line look like?
Yeah.
I'm selling these glasses. I don't really care who buys these glasses, but ultimately the more glasses I sell, the more money I am bringing to my house. In your case, the more money you make, it means that the more artists get revealed, get exposure. So you're helping an industry that by definition is very hard to make money from. Obviously, I'm not talking the Ed Sheerans, but the new upcoming artists.
Yeah.
And again, I say this with a very open heart, but I very much hope that you keep making loads of money because of that is not only going to benefit ZEBR and yourself, but that entails benefit a lot of different inspiring young talents.
Yeah. Yeah, I love looking back across the years and going, wow, that artist came out through a project that we did. And, one of my favorites is Leo Stay Trill. We worked on the Pink Lemonade campaign, and that was one of my favorites and most talked about last year. And it's so great to see him doing amazing things and how that song has not only impacted his career, but also other artists that are similar to his genre. And I think it gives, any time an artist breaks through in a genre and a style and an age, it gives a pathway for others that are similar. And I think it ends up unlocking a whole new industry of independent artists and gives an opportunity for that. And I think that's what I personally get more pride and excitement for breaking out an artist and helping on those projects than I do for, working on Beyonce Texas Hold'em. It's like, that's going to do well anyway.
And that's the fuel that got you going for 4 years without making money. because a lot of people, they start a business and they quit when they don't see profits overnight.
Yeah.
And if profit is what you're seeking, you're going to end up quitting very quickly, because it's not
100%,
normal
yeah.
to make money overnight. So thank you. I mean, this has been incredibly insightful, educational from a social media point of view, and inspirational.
Likewise, no, I really enjoyed the conversation.